Hello! Today we are going to cover the question, should I quit my job and go freelance? The answer, maybe. We're going to dive into some questions to help you self-explore and see what makes sense for you. So let's jump in. So, should you quit your job to go freelance? I am going to start with a story because it might help to illustrate my recommendations. So I started my WordPress dev business in 2009, although I didn't want to do WordPress at first. And I started it to help businesses who didn't have websites get websites, which in hindsight was a terrible customer base because if they didn't have a website already, they didn't value a website. It's much easier to do websites for people who already have them and think that they're worth spending money on. But in any case, I started this as someone who dropped out of college and I was just scrapping to make ends meet, and I always needed more money and more clients. So I took on a lot of low-paying work and struggled really just for a long time. And that struggle was partly a product of my not being very good because I'm self-taught. And so when I did my first website in 2008, it was like for my band or something in high school, and then another one after that and another one after that and sort of thing. So I just kind of gradually upped my skills. If you have been working at a job for a really long time and you're already really good, some of this experience of mine isn't relevant to you. But in any case, I didn't know much about business. I didn't know a lot of code and I struggled. And after several years of this, like maybe 4 or 5, I don't really remember now, but a good number of years, not like a year, a few years at least, I was just burnt out. I was always broke. I didn't enjoy my work and I was just kind of avoiding it. So I decided to get a job because then I could at least pay my bills. And it was the best decision I ever made for my business. Having the job, number one, I got to work around developers who were better than me. So it helped me to get better. I got to work in an agency. It was at a marketing agency. So I got to see how agencies kind of ran things and pick and choose what things I thought would make sense for me to do in my business and what things I didn't want to do. And most of all, it gave me a financial base so that I didn't need any new clients from my business. And I think that this is a really huge one for you to consider, regardless of how good you are. Being on a runway where you know you have XYZ months or whatever of savings that you're living off of, to me, it adds a lot of stress because you have to make things work, which means that you're inclined to take on crappy clients because you don't know when the next one's going to come. If you're striking out freelance with some like really successful blog and big email list, then fine. You're not maybe going to be worried about where you're going to get your clients. But most of us, when we strike out freelance from a job, we're just, going to go on Upwork or maybe talk to some clients we worked with at our job, if that's allowed and we don't get sued. So my story here, the thing I want to illustrate is that life sucked first. I got a job that paid the bills. And because I came into that job with my business experience, like I wasn't ready to say, yeah, sure, I'll totally work at your business and not do any of my own clients. And which was good because that business typically had a no moonlighting policy, which we'll talk about a bit later because I think that's pretty common. But can you hear that car out there announcing that they're collecting dead fridges and whatnot for scrap metal? Charming things about Georgia. Anyway, so that base of income from my job is what allowed me to grow my business in a really great way. It allowed me to level up my skills. It allowed me to pass up on clients that I wasn't interested in. And when I did eventually quit my job, it was because I had grown an awesome freelance business that was making me more money than my job was making me. So I set an income threshold where I was like, Zach, if you can get your income to this amount, you can quit your job and do your business. And I did, and it was great. It was like 2 years that I worked at that job, maybe. I think I hit the 2-year anniversary just barely. And I got my free Starbucks $5 gift card from them. So let's dig into this and see what makes sense for you. So all of this is to say, as you can probably guess, my recommendation is don't quit your job to become a freelancer. Become a freelancer to quit your job. Pretty clever, right? So I want to disclaim something here, which is that to do any like really hard negotiating at your job, such that you can build your freelance business on the side, you have to be very good at your job. This doesn't mean that you have to be like you have to know Rails and PHP and I don't know, what else is there even to know, right? JavaScript, backend JavaScript. You don't have to know a ton of code languages. What I mean when I say good at your job is just like not the one who people are picking up the slack of. Simply doing whatever your scope of work is really well and autonomously without people having to constantly check that you didn't make mistakes. That alone counts as being really good at your job. When I first worked at that marketing agency that I mentioned a minute ago, I was literally just doing HTML and CSS, and it was mostly copying and pasting. They hired me just to have someone to kind of like put out little front end fires when they happened. But one of their clients was HP, and HP paid them an obscene amount of money to copy and paste these basic HTML emails. And so they were happy to pay me to do it. And I did that job very efficiently and very reliably without needing oversight. So I ask you, are you the kind of person who triple checks your work before sending it off for review? Or are you the kind of person that are always a lot of back and forths before the product is actually like ready to get taken off your hands? So yeah, I would say take a really good look at how good you are at your job, not necessarily needing to expand your skills to other areas. If you're just doing HTML and CSS, fine. But how good are you at the HTML and CSS? And the reason that this is important is that when trying to do negotiations at your job that go against the like cultural norms of the job, you're going to run into resistance. I feel like I was having a talk with my boss pretty much every week when I was working at that agency because I was just wanting to tweak something, because if you just go with the flow at a job, you are going to be giving all of your time and energy to them. That's just how jobs are typically optimized, especially at larger companies. And so if you want to be striking it out independently and you want to mitigate your risk by optimizing for a freelance situation first, just understand like it's going to be a bit of a struggle. If you don't like confrontation, if you don't like challenging authority, that'll be a skill that you'll want to build if you decide to take this route. And you don't have to be like fighting. I'm not at all suggesting that. It's more just understanding that if they had their way, you wouldn't be freelancing because it doesn't benefit them. You could argue that it does in a certain sense because you're like improving your skills to do your freelancing, but by and large, you're trying to freelance so that you can quit your job. It's not like anyone doesn't know the deal. And thus, in order to create a situation where you can do that, you have to be able to deliver a lot of value to the company and keep delivering that value, even though you're trying to gradually transition away. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about some of these questions. So as I touched on before, my recommendation is to do your freelancing as a side hustle while you're working at your current job. And this is where some objections come up, like a no moonlighting policy or any other myriad objections that you might have. And the response that I have is you just kind of have to make it work. I'm not saying it's going to be easy or convenient. I'm just saying that it's the best way to go if your personality is like me, which we're going to explore in a minute with regards to working with a runway and stuff like that. I don't do well when I'm working with a runway. Whenever I've done it, even recently with a bunch of money invested and saved, I just don't do well. I just don't. It's just too much pressure. I feel much better if I have a freelance contract and I'm working on some new business on the side versus quitting all my freelance stuff and just trying to do a new business. It just doesn't work for my brain. So if you're like me, I think you'll enjoy the results of negotiating in your job and working a side hustle more than quitting the job. But we'll explore this more in a minute. So the main thing here is to just understand, I'm not suggesting this will be easy. I don't think it ever would be easy. But if you're good, you can negotiate it. And if you really can't negotiate it, if you're good enough that you could negotiate it, you should be able to get a different job where you can negotiate it. So that's my thought on this matter. So here's my question for you. One of the first self-exploratory questions. What's important to you with your work, with your life? Why do you even want to freelance? I think this would be a good time to pause and just create an ordered list of priorities with your work. Is it pay? Is it time freedom? Is it freedom to do work you find interesting? Like, what is it, if you were to create your dream job, that is most important to you in order? Because obviously everyone wants to be paid well, everyone wants freedom, but having a hierarchical list of priorities is going to be really helpful for you making your decisions. So that's the first self-exploratory question. Hey, quick note, this is future Zach, hence the different shirt. This video that you're watching now is actually a part of my free How to Transition from Your Dev Job to Freelance course. So if you want to follow along in there, you'll get access to a bunch of really helpful worksheets and checklists that are going to help you implement and carry you along through the process. And they'll also teach you how to get more freedom and autonomy in your current job, how to get your first freelance clients booked, and how to build your side hustle income and transition from your current job to going freelance with an income that will replace your job. So if you want to join, again, totally free, it's quityourdevjob.com. And you can join the free course there, and hope to see you inside. Back to the video, I think. I'm not sure if I'm putting this at the end of the video or in the middle yet, so maybe back to your video. Next one is how you do under pressure. Regarding specifically the thing I mentioned before of having a runway. I don't do well. Even recently when I tried to do it, I had, I think, about a year's worth of expenses saved. But granted, when this happened, there's this war starting with Russia, Ukraine, there's COVID, I can mention all sorts of reasons. But the fact is, my head just gets into a weird place. Starting a new business, you put in a lot of work to crickets. And I don't know, it just makes me feel a bit isolated, and there's nothing to kind of encourage me that I'm going in the right direction. And having only that without any sort of financial base coming in, it's just very stress inducing. And what ends up happening is I get way less work done because I'm mostly avoiding work or feeling stressed or depressed or anxious or whatever, and seeking like relief with video games or food or whatever. And it doesn't make sense. I do much better doing what I'm doing now, which is I have an ongoing contract for one of my clients that I work 2 hours for every morning. So I do 2 hours on this project, and then I transition to my own work. That pays the bills, replaces the income I would have had from that marketing agency job back in the day. So it allows me to like talk to humans, deliver value to people, and build my own side project. For me, this is the best way. I would ask yourself to imagine what it'd be like for you. I don't know how you could imagine this if you haven't done it before. I don't have any ideas there, but just, I guess if you haven't had any sort of related experiences, maybe step into the shoes and suppose you had 6 months or a year of expenses saved, and imagine it's been 2 months that you've been kind of applying to gigs on Upwork or whatever your marketing strategy is, and you still haven't gotten a gig yet. How would that feel? Or all the gigs you've gotten have sucked and you liked them less than your old day job. How would that feel? What would you be thinking and feeling and planning for your next steps? If you think you wouldn't do well there, then I would encourage you to entertain the idea of side hustle styles first. And you can do what I did and just set an income threshold where once you hit that, you can quit. And it doesn't even have to replace your old or current job's income. Let's say you're making $5,000 a month. You don't necessarily have to make $5,000 from freelancing before you quit. You can make even say $2,500, and you could have your savings to float you, but you could use $2,500 as your sort of indicator that you're getting some momentum and stuff's going to work out. Or you could use non-monetary ones like getting 3 leads a week in a niche that you're interested in of clients who are interesting to you. 3 leads a week is quite a lot, honestly, but whatever it is for you. I'm just trying to give you ideas. So the next question is, what if you went part-time? Could you budget aggressively, or maybe even not that aggressively, and work part-time at your job and still get your bills paid and not make dumb financial decisions as a consequence of cutting your income in half? If you did that, what would that mean for you starting your freelance business? Would that give you more time to get things going? Self-exploratory question. What would it mean for your life if you went part-time? Next self-exploratory question. Is there any way you can gain more efficiency to have the same output in less time? This mostly applies to people who are working remotely, which with COVID is a lot of us. I have a friend who was able to create 2 free half days for her own business every week, simply by doing creative time blocking to increase her efficiency. So she gets the same amount of work done. No one at her work has any idea that she's taking these half days off. And her work quality hasn't suffered, so who cares? So that's the thing I would ask you is how much time are you spending being reactive at your job, going to meetings, responding to messages on Slack, emails, that sort of thing? How much time are you spending avoiding work with like YouTube, going to the water cooler, etc.? And is there anything you can do to basically squeeze in a lot more deep work, get the deep work done first, and then harvest all that time that you would have otherwise spent avoiding work to build your freelance business? And the next question is kind of something I touched on earlier, which is, do you really want to be a freelancer? And if so, why? Something worth noting is that when you are a freelancer, clients are still going to dictate your work. You don't really get absolute freedom. You get to turn away clients if you're privileged enough to have enough business to do that. But you still are going to have to do stuff that's boring sometimes. And at least for me, with my ADHD, avoiding boring work tends to be a big motivator for me. So I would have a think about your reasons for wanting to be a freelancer and challenge yourself to figure out if you really want that, or if maybe what you really want is an optimized job. Because when you become a freelancer, you're giving up like guaranteed income, and you're giving up being able to just manage your own little task. You don't get to just be a developer anymore when you're a freelancer. You have to learn a lot of business administrative stuff. You have to learn marketing. You have to learn all sorts of new things. And I think that's worth thinking about. And also consider that things are rarely as easy as they initially seem. I always have to remind myself of this one. When I was first starting my business, I was doing a lot of low quality prospecting, a lot of outbound stuff. Like I'd go on Craigslist, which if you're not in the US, it's just kind of like a little community website where someone posts saying, oh, I want a website. Can anyone make them? I've got a budget of $200. I did a lot of low quality stuff like that. I think that was quite a few years ago. That was 2009. So these days, the more common route, I think, for new freelancers is Upwork. But on Upwork, you're competing with a million other people for low paying gigs at the very bottom of the payment food chain. And a lot of life is about being in the game long enough to get a lucky break. And for me, my lucky break was that I did this. I used to work with this dude named Rick, and we were in the same like coaching group. And he was starting his internet marketing business, but really struggling. He was friends with these really big podcasters. They did like a mastermind group. He recommended me to them. I did their website, and they were an industry leader of podcasters in their field. And so as soon as I had done their stuff, everybody else wanted me to do their stuff. And then from there, I kind of hit that escape velocity where I was booked, making more than 6 figures each year, and just had all the work I could ever want. But if I hadn't ever talked with Rick, that wouldn't have happened. So understand that if you are going to strike it out to be freelance, unless you can take some of your clients with you from your current job, which is kind of questionably ethical, in my opinion, you're probably going to have a rocky go at the start unless you have a super rare and valuable skill set. For me, as a WordPress developer who just knew front-end stuff at the time, I didn't have a super rare and valuable skill set. I think what made me kind of unique was being a really good, not really good, but a good enough designer and a good dev. Most people are one or the other. But if you're just doing like front-end dev stuff or back-end WordPress stuff, you have to be differentiated from the competition, and that takes time to find your niche and to find your hook. So that's it. That was my last slide, apparently. Thanks for watching. See you around.